This is Force 13 Live. We have made a call at this hour, and we are now saying that Dorian now has winds of 130 miles per hour, which is Category 4 status, and a pressure of 961 millibars. This is from our satellite estimates at this time, pending recon data, which will arrive in the next few minutes hopefully, but probably hours. But for the time being, we are putting Dorian as a Category 4 with winds of 130 miles per hour and a pressure of 961 millibars. That is latest news from us. Not official at that point. The National Hurricane Center going quite a bit low at 115 miles per hour, but its visual appearance is certainly more than enough for that intensity. My name is Nathan Foy, and joining me is a team consisting of David, Tim, Mike and Isaac to tell us what they think of that news.
Yeah, recon has just got into the, looks like it's gone into the outer eye wall, and they already reported winds up to, by the looks of it, of about 60 knots surface winds. So we'll get more information in about roughly 10 minutes from now. We'll get another update from recon, and it'll probably be in the eye itself by then. But yeah, they're just getting into the eye wall now.
According to now that the storm looks like it's probably already a Category 4 and still rapidly intensifying, what would you say their percentage chances of Category 5 status happening?
I don't think they've changed that much, because it is very difficult to get a Category 5 in this sort of region. I'm still sort of thinking it will only get to a borderline kind of thing like Floyd did, but I do certainly think at this point it will become at least a borderline high-end Category 4 at some point during its existence. If you've just joined us, it's 2 minutes past 7 on the US East Coast, where we're monitoring Hurricane Dorian. The National Hurricane Center will be producing an intermediate advisory in just less than an hour, and then maybe we'll find out for sure just how strong the storm actually is. But just for reference, we are now putting it at 130 miles per hour. That's Category 4, pressure of 961 millibars based on satellite estimates, but recon and their estimates, when they get their observations in the next hour, will take precedence, and we will adjust accordingly when they do find some information. And Isaac has sent an image of what's going on right now as well. You mentioned that before. There it is in graphical representation. And the purple barbs there showing hurricane force winds.
And like I said, in about 8 minutes or so, we'll get another update, and by then it'll be in the eye wall unless they decided to get it yesterday and move just around the eye wall.
David, you're also with us at this hour as well. Any thoughts?
Yes, I am. Well, I was listening closely to your high range 4 comment, and I'm going to lend support to it when you, or I should say, when we look at how well the satellite imagery is developing. And I also pick up on an earlier comment of yours, a possible eyewall replacement. But if we look back at the satellite imagery 24 hours to today, the system has really improved overall.
So the question is, does anyone else think the National Hurricane Center will go for a big upgrade, or well, I guess none of us will be drawn to comment on that, bearing in mind that the planes are going in right now.
Yep. I mean, I would say it's possible they upgrade it to a 4, but I would, to be on the safer side, wait until recon.
Does anyone think that if the storm is intensifying faster than expected, that could increase the chances that it will move further north?
It definitely does increase the chances, Nathan.
And not to mention if it slows down. even worse for.
Those are the things that
the
we
storm
are
itself.
that we will be looking for days, most likely, as we try and figure out what happens with Dorian. At one point, every model out there was forecasting a Florida landfall. Not to say that's still not going to happen, but one or two models just shying away from that slightly, taking the storm just off the coast, but still impacting the coast of Florida with hurricane force winds. That could even be a worse case than what was originally forecasted, because rather than a direct impact into Florida, it will then go and skirt the east coast and could still be a very strong hurricane as it veers round, and may well do even worse than what Matthew did 3 years ago.
Nathan, sorry guys, I just wanted
sure.
cut in, read the Marine Weather Statement, National Weather Service Miami, Marine Weather Statement for Biscayne Bay
Biscayne.
and adjacent Atlantic waters for strong thunderstorms capable of producing 30-knot winds along with water spout potential in effect until 7:45. A confirmed water spout probably within the region or to its north, probably about 3 hours ago.
Is that associated with the north western side of the storm, or just a separate cell?
Well, my personal opinion would be separate. I think it's far too soon. But if Tim's here, he might be able to clarify it.
I wonder if I could have a look for just a moment, because I'm not entirely sure myself whether maybe it's being enhanced by the storm's presence.
Because Tim and I were talking late last night, local time, US. We're looking at the buoys, and one that Tim cited, it had a reported wave height 21 feet.
We got the recon data in now.
Really?
And they have a 10-second surface wind reading of, by the looks of it, maybe 102 knots there. And they got into the eye.
Interesting. And which quadrant was that?
Pressure. It's in the western quadrant, and the lowest pressure they have found, by the looks of it, looks to be 946.1 flight level.
Oh, so that's not at the surface?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm guessing they put a drop sound in, but the data hasn't come in yet. But the lowest I'm seeing is 946, and
so there is a potential that
wind.
There's a potential that 946 millibars could be at the surface.
And looks like 912 knot surface wind. Although I will say, one of them is a suspect reading, and the other one is not. So make of that what you will. But they signified, by the looks of it, 112 knots second.
Well, this is getting interesting then. Of course, we'll have more updates from the recon throughout this hour. Stay with us, we'll have it in real time, as well as the satellite imagery, which we will bring back with you. Well, there's some recent imagery there, but there is the very latest on Hurricane Dorian. The last image of this frame is from 5 past, so that's less than, about 4 minutes ago. So this imagery is very much up to date and will be as we continue to look at it throughout tonight. Let's just take a look and see if we can do another eye check. The temperature inside the eye is something that we often monitor and we regularly measure to see whether that temperature is increasing. A warmer eye means an intensifying storm. The cloud tops appear to be getting more uniform around the eye at this point and increasing in height, so that also is a sign of strengthening. I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, if this isn't yet a Category 4 storm. That's why one of the reasons why we've put it on our screens. That's not official information. National Hurricane Center will put out a new update in just less than an hour, but from satellite observations we think that that is the case. And the recon, we're going to find out very shortly just how strong they're finding it.
If you're looking at chat, I posted some images if you want to look at them in detail of the recon findings so far.
So there's an image. I'm not sure we can see it close up enough to actually be of use, but they're finding some strong winds near the center there. I can't read the numbers.
The lowest reading pressure-wise looks to be 946.1 in the middle on the wind one if you're looking at that, and then on the bar graph it looks like the highest reading seems to be 112 or 113 or so, give or take, surface wind.
Wow.
And again, I must stress one of them is suspect, so make of that what you will. The other one is not, but one is.
The eye temperature is still 18 degrees. Actually, we've now got a reading of 19 degrees Celsius. So the storm is still intensifying when you look at those numbers. And Recon appear to be starting to find that now as well. If you've got any comments or questions for us during this hour, send us a message and we'll take them. You start your message with Force 13 all in text and it will light up for us.
Some interesting news, Nathan. We now have a fourth Hurricane Hunter flight just deployed, an AF-307 now deploying out.
All right. So the information is coming in pretty quick at the moment. And
the first planes come in.
What's that?
So the first recon flight has documented and already sent. Ooh.
And now we just stay here and wait for more information from the recon. Alright, we got some more questions. Will the storm affect areas hit by Florence? And Tim might be our expert on that.
I would say that is going to be really too early to tell. It really depends on what it's going to do with the recurvature. I know Strat was looking at the models earlier in our stream, and the GFS calling for a possible Charleston landfall. If it does follow that route, most of the Carolinas, including United States headquarters in Fayetteville, would get some very heavy impacts of the rain all up and down the coastline up through Wilmington, Morehead City possibly could get it. So yeah, some of those areas that were hit by Florence, we could be heavily impacted again.
Indeed. We're still looking at it on that infrared imagery. Let's now bring you, if you've not seen it yet, to the National Hurricane Center's forecast. This was their latest. They expect it to strike Florida as a major hurricane. Let me read out some of the advisory information for you again. They're describing it as extremely dangerous, heading for the northwestern Bahamas. At 5 p.m. they issued a hurricane warning for the northwestern Bahamas, including the Abarcos, Berry Islands, Bimini, Eleuthera, Grand Bahama Island, and New Providence. A hurricane watch remains in effect for Andros Island. Of course, interests in southern and central Florida should monitor the progress of Dorian, and I would add the word closely to the end of that statement. Hurricane force winds extend outwards up to 30 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend up to 115 miles. Hurricane conditions are expected in the hurricane warning area in the northwestern Bahamas by Sunday, with tropical storm force winds beginning by Saturday night. A life-threatening storm surge will raise water levels by as much as 10 to 15 feet above normal tide levels in areas of onshore winds in the northwestern Bahamas. Near the coast, the surge will be accompanied by large and destructive waves. Dorian is expected to produce the following rainfall accumulations this weekend into the middle of next week. I'll just switch over to the other graphic, which better displays that information too. There's the rainfall graphic. Northwestern Bahamas 10 to 15 inches, isolated up to 20. Central coastal sections of the southeast United States 6 to 12 inches, isolated 18. Central Bahamas 2 to 4 inches, isolated up to 6. This rainfall may cause life-threatening flash floods. Also surf. Swells are likely to begin affecting the east-facing shores of the Bahamas, the Florida East Coast, and the southeastern United States coast during the next few days. These swells are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions, and please consult products from your local weather office.
Nathan, apology. Jean, one of our followers on Facebook, was wondering if each of us could introduce ourselves, our location and first name. And
Okay, well, it's all getting very cozy. Well, yes, I mean, we do try and add a personal touch when we can, but the storm does often get well ahead of us, as it often does. Well, I'm presenting the show tonight. My name's Nathan Foy. I created the Force 13 project nearly 8 years ago, and we've been tracking storms ever since. Many people have joined the fold over the last few years, and I guess you guys can say anything you like at this point if you want to.
And for
Add a
me,
line or two.
David, I'm based East Coast of Australia, and I manage for Nathan the AU channel.
And he'll probably be running some of our nighttime coverage tonight as well.
Yes, looking forward to that. So I'll be here considering the time zone. But keep on putting the questions either on Facebook or YouTube.
Yeah, we've got
And
plenty
it's
more to
always
go
good
through.
to be here. Yes.
Oh, I'm Isaac, and I'm from South Texas. I've been tracking storms for over 10 years now, and just watching this storm carefully. But as I say this, unfortunately, I have to get going now. So have a great day or night wherever you guys are. Make
Thanks
sure
for
you
joining
listen
us.
to the National Hurricane. Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for putting me on. But listen to
No
the
problem.
National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service. Listen, of course, to us over the next few hours as we're going to provide the latest. But till then, I have to go, guys. So see you guys later. Have
All
a
right.
great day
Sure.
or night wherever you guys are. Peace.
Thanks for joining us. And also, Tim, you've been tracking storms for the best part of 25 years, right?
Yes, Nathan, I am. I am Timothy Ringo, based out of Fayetteville, North Carolina, current headquarters for the Force 13 US channel. And yes, this is my 25th season of storm tracking. And looking at Dorian.
Well, just to bring you onto something here, a lot of people have been comparing this storm. Well, a few people have mentioned how it's looked a bit like Luis of 1995. Any thoughts on that since you tracked it?
Oh God, Luis. I would actually have to go back and do my research
Uh-oh.
on that one, but it does have some similarities. I know we've been throwing the Andrews out there in terms of how it looks right now, and I can see a little bit of an Andrew resemblance, even though its track that it's taken up to this point is very different than what we have seen
Yeah.
from the Andrew track. So it is very similar to, but I'm not going to say this is going to be an Andrew. I mean, it's still too early to tell.
I think
Right
Andrew became a Category 5 at about 74... Was it 74? Yeah, I think so. 74 degrees west. And this storm at the moment is at 70... nearly 71 degrees west, and that's around the point where Andrew became a Category 4, funny enough. I don't know if we can read anything into that or not.
Nathan, just monitoring social media, especially the Twitter. Couple of questions. Is it going to eventually become a fish storm?
Oh, God. Who said that? That's an appalling question.
Comment, yeah, it's just a comment on eyewall replacement.
Well, that is a
and
possibility.
A solid Cat 4.
I think it is a solid Category 4, yes. Looking at the imagery. But even the most convincing imagery can be misleading. It depends what the recon plane says. That takes precedence above everything as soon as we find out exactly what those wind speeds are inside the storm.
Now, I just want to ask you, Nathan, about the activity in the eye. What was the colour when it becomes a Cat 5?
Alright, so again, these are just general terms. I'll have to come back to that in just a minute. but I'm just going to leave you with the rainfall graphic there for a moment. So quite often we're always looking at the rapid scan 1 minute imagery of these storms, and the color scheme on there can often be a little bit misleading as well. It's a color scheme that isn't as well established as other ones are, and as soon as I can get some more imagery from what I want to demonstrate next, I've already shown it once during our stream so far, we'll get back to that shortly. We'll take some questions in the meantime. Will Dorian hit Miami and West Palm Beach? The percentage chances of storm conditions there are very high, and certainly a significant chance of that. Whether it will make landfall down there is unlikely, but not out of the question, and we'll have to keep watching. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more by tomorrow. Could Dorian affect Florida as a Category 5? It certainly could. I still don't think it will, even if it does reach Category 5 status away from Florida. But I still don't think it's going to hold that intensity all the way up until landfall. Could this be a little like a Hurricane Irene situation? Not really at all. I'm not really seeing that comparison. Irene moved through the Bahamas and then struck, would have been North Carolina, I think, Tim?
I would have to go back and look at Irene.
It must have been.
That one, yeah. We do have some recon data that just came in.
Right.
One of the NOAA 2 did make a drop zone pass in the southern eyewall of Dorian, getting a pressure of 951 millibars at the surface with a 13 knot surface wind with it.
So we are looking at a pressure in the 940s right now, aren't we?
Yes.
I would say probably 949 would be a good estimate, but we'll have to see what recon finds on this next pass through.
As soon as we figure it out, we'll update that graphic at the bottom of the screen. In the meantime, we're leaving it with what our estimate was at the start of the hour. It just didn't seem right that it would still be 115 miles per hour. Now something that I want to show you then. So this is the 1 minute, goes 16, beautiful imagery it is, but it can often lead to knee-jerk reactions. You look at this imagery with an untrained eye, you might say, hey, it's a strong Category 4, maybe borderline Category 5 off this imagery. Well, it's not. The red areas, alright, it looks pretty ferocious, but we're actually looking for black areas to form around the eye, which would denote temperatures, eye wall temperatures in the higher end of the -70s, getting towards the -80s, and that would mean a very strong eye wall. But at the moment it's only lower -70s and high -60s in the eye wall at the minute, and that isn't really what we're looking for a high-end Category 4. Now, on the more established RAM imagery, this is an example of an image from RAM, 4 kilometer resolution, so it doesn't look as good. It's not as pretty, it's not so much eye candy, but it is, in my view, a better way of estimating the storm's intensity objectively. So you look at the greens there and you can see just a tiny little smattering of red on the western side of the storm. Now, a general rule of thumb, to get to a moderate Category 4 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale, you would want a whole ring of red around the eye. Only a tiny little bit of red there at the moment, so it's nowhere near that. Although the eye temperature is so warm, nearly 19 degrees Celsius, it does sort of bend that rule just a little bit, but not enough for us to give moderate Category 4 at this point. So you're looking for reds all the way around the eye, and if you get not just a little bit of red, but there is a color scale at the bottom, but it starts at dark red, and as it progresses up the temperature scale, it goes towards a bright red, and then it turns yellow. So if you're getting towards bright reds all the way around the eye, then you're probably almost certainly looking at a Category 5 if you've got a good eye temperature. But well, as you can see, we are quite some distance away from getting anything near that yet. We'll continue to cycle between the different imageries to give you those ideas as well. But at the minute, we're talking about minimal Category 4, 130 miles an hour. But as I said as well, the recon planes going through will take precedent over any satellite imagery that we can throw at you. So we really are waiting for their information, and if recon flew all the way around the world, that rule would apply the whole world over. Let's now talk to Samuel, who's just joined us. Hi, Sam. Are you all right?
I am doing fantastic today. I have been increasingly growing concerns over Dorian. I do have 2 people I have known personally in real life who used to live near me. They now live in Florida and Georgia, and according to a few of the forecast models, are in the path, are going to get some pretty significant impacts from this storm. Although it's not looking to be as severe as it was previously,
well, we don't
but
know.
it is still it's still going to be something that I'm really keeping an eye on. And now that it's gone to now it's a preliminary
Most likely,
Category 4 storm. It could we could see a potential peak at Category 5, although the chances still remain slim.
Is anyone really surprised by how much it's intensified today? Because let's not
No.
forget, it was the most conducive day for the storm throughout the whole forecast period. Wind shear near nil. Other conditions are playing into its favour.
I'm not surprised.
Neither am I.
And I guess the main question now is, what does happen next?
So what happens next is we need to keep an eye on the storm. I think that it will definitely affect some land within the next few days. Hand it over to someone else real quick.
Yeah, Tim, would you like to reiterate some of the preparedness tips and information that we've been going through in the last hour?
Absolutely. I can actually throw them back up for screen share for the viewers. Let me find. I've got 30, 40 tabs just so I got to figure out which tab it.
Yeah, of course.
Nathan, when do you expect hurricane watches to be issued for Florida, the southeastern tip of Florida?
Well, I think they're going to do that tonight, or 11 p.m. or 5 a.m. I think they're going to do that for Florida. We're just looking for some more questions at the moment. The chances of Dorian making it to a Category 5, well, earlier when we started tonight's stream, we put it on the bottom of our screen that it was 20% chance. You might want to call that 25% now. That would be a 1 in 4. This storm continues to look even better at every frame. We thought for a minute last hour that it might just be shrinking and maybe there could be an impending collapse. Nope, that's not happening right now. This storm continues to intensify, and Recon is confirming it with estimated pressures now into the 940s.
Nathan, we see some models, specifically the HWRF model, has it rapidly growing in size just before making landfall in Florida. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not familiar with that, to be honest, but what I did see is that the models were talking about the moisture part of the storm rapidly growing as it approached the Bahamas, and I think we're seeing that now. As we see that core grow, it will probably continue to get higher cloud tops. That's more moisture contained inside the storm over those piping hot sea surface temperatures, and over the next 48 hours I think we'll see a continued, just a gradual increase. I think, I mean, goodness knows, if it does a rapid intensification phase at this point, then it would be absolutely crazy, but that can't be ruled out. But I think the most likely scenario is a gradual intensification phase. You know, we've not seen anything that rapid today. It has gone up a lot, 2 categories, sure, but it's not one of these storms that has gone from a Category 1 to a Category 5 in 12 hours like they sometimes end up doing. Extreme examples, but... Sorry?
I was just saying a storm that's a who knows when we'll see the next storm do that. I mean, that's a one in
Sure.
every wild occurrence. That was Wilma of '05. That was went from tropical storm to Category 5 in 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. Obviously, it was never going to do anything like that, but this would appear to be bad enough. Let's go over to Tim now, if we can.
Yeah, Nathan. Just quickly, Recon did confirm that pressure at 951 on their latest pass.
So there we are. 951 millibars is confirmed in this storm. We are provisionally running it with 949. That will be reflected on the graphics in just a few minutes. So 130 mile per hour winds, we think, and a pressure of 949.
And what I have on screen is a hurricane supply checklist being submitted by the Florida Emergency Management. I went over this a couple hours ago, but I'll reiterate it, just some of the key points on it. If you're going to be trying to ride this hurricane out, which is not recommended, but if you have to, you're going to want to have a bunch of these items on this list. Primarily, you want water for one person per day for at least 7 days. That does include your pets as well, having that gallon of water. Flashlights, batteries. You want a weather radio that is battery operated because there is a good chance that power will go out in some of these areas. A lot of your important documents, you want to have those in a waterproof container. Make sure you have enough medication for at least a couple weeks because you never know how long these businesses may stay closed during this time. And make sure you have everything to take care of your pets, and definitely take your pets with you. I can't stress that enough that pets are family, so you want to take them with you if you're going to be evacuating from these areas.
I mean, do people actually not take their pets with them?
There was a few stories during Florence last year where people did leave their pets when they evacuated, and
Damn.
sad to say, a few times in Mexico Beach during Michael, there was a few reports of pets being left behind, which is very tragic.
Nathan, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
What are we going for central pressure? I think you said 949.
Yes, that's what we're at now.
And Tim, sorry, I just cited something on the Twitter reference to 946.
Yeah, we have seen that around, but was that confirmed or not? I'm still struggling to hear that one. It's been bandied about quite a bit.
Yeah, drop zone in the Iowa Dorian measured 133 mile per hour wind a few minutes ago, likely, and the comment likely now have a category 4.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if our position is 946.
Still 949 at the moment. Subject to change.
Yeah, that 946.
It's a very fast-moving situation.
Reading of 38 knots surface level, so that is a little suspect.
Do we know what quadrant that wind 133 report?
I would have to take a look, but the 946 was in the southern Iowa. I'll have to look back through the raw data file and see if I can find where we were seeing those higher readings, and those might be even suspect as well.
I can now tell you that the hurricane is 490 miles away from Freeport if you're keeping track of the distances, and that number is decreasing. So it's moved 30 miles in the 2.5 hours that we've been on the air, so it pretty much correlates with the movement speed that we think it's going at, so that makes sense. But it is drawing ever closer.
So, National Weather Service, Charleston. Tide level, 7 foot. It's got MLLW, Charleston. This is where minor coastal flooding typically begins, but still 90 minutes till high tide. Expect major flooding parts of South Carolina coast, including Charleston,
Wait, is this now?
Yep.
Wow.
IOP Sullivan's Island, Edisto Beach, Huntington Island, Hilton Head. So they're expecting major flooding in those areas
Thanks for that.
due to
That's
the
not
tide.
good. That's not good, especially if Dorian actually affects them. That could end up resulting in catastrophic damage.
News here, the National Hurricane Center have put the disturbance now at 40% chance in the next 5 days. Some models are on board with it forming into a tropical cyclone as it enters the eastern Atlantic, marked by the yellow X at the minute. 40% in the next 5 days, but still near 0% chance in the next 48 hours. Just in case you're curious about the other areas, the Eastern Pacific, nothing, and same too in the Central Pacific. In the Western Pacific though, 2 invests, 90W and 91W, have been marked as low by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. 92W also exists near Palau, but they haven't yet tagged that one on their advisory screen. So the main feature, of course, is Dorian as we continue our coverage, and we will be here indefinitely at this point forward. I will certainly be here with you until 11 p.m. Eastern Time, and then I'm not sure what we're going to do after that, whether we just throw it back to our nighttime graphics or whether someone else will take over, but we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, Dorian is intensifying still, and let's go back to that latest imagery once again. So still lots of red around the storm, but that convection is still somewhat shallow. We're looking more for some black areas to develop around the eye, but the eye temperature itself is very warm indeed, which is really propping up the storm's intensity more than anything else right now. Does anyone else have anything for us at this time?
Yes, I do want to
Go ahead.
focus
Oh,
this
no,
a little bit.
Sam, please.
Sorry. Yes, I'd like to focus a little bit of attention on the Cape Verde disturbance. What kind of I have been seeing a few long distance models hinting at a possible high-end Trop TS, and further out possibly a hurricane, but I would not worry about that. Obviously, I would not worry about that right now, but I would keep that in the back of your mind for anyone along the East Coast, just to see, because Cape Verde storms do have a history of becoming large storms like what Florence did last year.
We've had a question there as well. Oh, just gone now. Where's it gone? Whether we're doing a regular non-stream update tonight. Now, I know there is demand for both our live streaming coverage and for our regular updates. I believe, Tim, you're going to be doing a normal update on our channel tonight at 11 p.m.
I can tackle that, yes.
So Tim will be providing that update late tonight on the channel. If you're somehow not watching us from our YouTube page, you can check out our channel online as well. We are streaming to Facebook too at this time, so you can follow Force 13 on Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe to us on YouTube for the latest updates. Many places where we're posting all kinds of things right now. Also, let's see what we have here too. More questions about updates, but the main feature will be our live streaming for the next few hours. We throw our whole schedule aside for it.
Nathan, I just want to.
Yeah.
Nathan, I just want to ask, when is the next National Hurricane Center update?
So the National Hurricane Center will update very soon indeed. The 8 p.m. intermediate advisory is due within the next 20 minutes, obviously, because that's when 8 p.m. is. And we'll find out just how strong they think it will be. If Recon's going investigating the storm right now, if it was doing another pass soon, then they'll probably hold on for as long as possible before they issue the update to try and get the latest information.
Nathan, I want to go back a couple hours with Dorian. Whereas in the earlier parts of the day here, we saw Dorian attempting to form an eye. In some cases, it did form an eye for only a period of a few minutes before a convection flare would suddenly take over the eye. Now, why is that?
Well, that happened a lot yesterday into today, and it's just that the convection is really clouding over the eye, or was during the earlier part of the day. I mean, people see it a lot more now because we've got the rapid scan imagery. People didn't really see it so much back on the older imagery. It just gradually happened, but because we are looking under the microscope, every little thing that the storm does, we notice when the eye appears for just a few minutes, people go crazy and say, oh wow, this is becoming a rapidly intensifying storm. Well, no, the eye was always there, just that sometimes it can be cloud filled or overtopping clouds from the convection over the eye, especially with the weaker hurricanes. But obviously now that this one is becoming much stronger, it's really showing it with all of the convection being blown around the eye, and it's much more structured with that eye wall. But you can see how that eye has been progressing today, and it's getting ever rounder, and certainly getting warmer as well and more ferocious. The latest eye temperature is 19 degrees Celsius, which is very warm in terms of eyes. For instance, on the same satellite, we got Hurricane Irma, I think was 17 or 18 degrees. Hurricane Maria was 16 or 17. You know, these are ferocious storms, and this is another one now. What is stopping this storm from being a high-end Category 4 or even a Category 5 is that the eye wall and the whole diameter around it there, the red zones, aren't turning black. And that is the difference between... If this was Hurricane Irma right now, you'd be seeing lots of black surrounding the eye. And that is what makes a Category 5 in this instance. And this one is lacking it at the moment.
So you would say that we're certainly seeing some Category 5 characteristics?
Oh, well, that would be being a bit presumptuous, I suppose. But it's certainly a Category 4. Solid Category 4 right now is what we can tell you.
Do you know, actually, I think I could pull it up, the wave heights around the eye wall right now.
I think other people might know more than that about me right now.
Just a minute, let me see if I can pull it up here in a minute.
That is not something I've been looking at this evening. Do we have any more information from Recon right now?
Not at the moment.
Nope.
NOAA 2 is starting to move its way towards the north, so we may see a northeast to southwest track here. Whether or not they're going to get that information in before the 8 o'clock advisory to the National Hurricane Center, that is really going to be up in the air right now.
Absolutely. So we're just entering a bit of a lull here, I suppose, whilst we wait for two big things, more recon passes being one of them, and the other one being the National Hurricane Center update, which is due in the next 15 minutes. So stay with us, we'll carry that update as soon as it arrives. In the meantime, not much to talk about. Let's see if there's any questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. It will light up big and bright for me. People saying things like it's doing a buzzsaw effect. I mean, I've seen much more clearer buzzsaws than this, but you're starting to see one or two little hints of it on the southern side there.
Nathan, just to let you know, there is another recon plane that just took off from Miami and is en route to Hurricane Dorian right now.
So that's about 600 miles away from the storm, so it should get there within about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Maybe as soon as an hour.
Maybe sooner. Okay. I don't actually know how fast those planes fly.
I believe the P3 Orion has a top speed of 480, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that would make sense, just over an hour if it was going top speed.
They typically use, well, at least what I saw on what information I know of, they typically do 85 to 90% throttle, which would be around 420 miles an hour.
All right, what are the chances of it hitting Miami is another question. We get something I've not actually read out so far whilst we wait for that new advisory to come in. Oh no, it is in. They find it to have 125 mile an hour winds, so they're still going one step lower than we are. They're calling for a high in Category 3 now, 125 miles an hour, pressure of 950 millibars. No real change, no change at all to the warnings. At 8 p.m, the well-defined eye of Hurricane Dorian was located near latitude 25.3 north, longitude 71 degrees west. Dorian is moving towards the west-northwest near 10 miles per hour. A slower west-northwestward to westward motion should begin tonight and continue into early next week. On this track, the core of Dorian should move over the Atlantic, well north of the southeastern and central Bahamas tonight and tomorrow, be near or over the northwestern Bahamas on Sunday, and be near the Florida east coast late Monday. Data from a NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft indicate that the maximum sustained winds have increased to near 125 miles per hour with higher gusts. We're still staying 130, by the way, based on the satellite appearance. They're calling it Category 3. It's just near the border with Category 4. Additional strengthening is forecast, and Dorian is anticipated to remain an extremely dangerous hurricane whilst it moves near the northwestern Bahamas and approaches Florida into early next week. Again, hurricane force winds extend outwards up to 30 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outwards up to 115 miles. The next update from the National Hurricane Center will be at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 hours from now. So that is the very latest from them, and just to read some wind probabilities from their last full advisory. So listen up here, I'm going to read out a lot of numbers. These are the percentage chances for tropical storm force winds. Might disagree slightly with the numbers that we present on our screen, but shouldn't be more than 1 or 2 percentage points out. So first of all, places like, we're looking at North Carolina first. Greensboro, 4% chance of tropical storm force winds. That's in the next 5 days alone, not beyond that. Should point that out. Raleigh, 3%. Rocky Mount, 3%. Fayetteville, 7%. That's where Tim is. Charlotte, 9%. Cherry Point, 4%. New River, 4%. Morehead City, 5%. Surf City, 6%. Wilmington, 7%. Florence, South Carolina, 13%. Columbia, 19%. Little River, 12%. Myrtle Beach, 18%. Georgetown, 19%. Charleston, 29%. Beaufort, 37%. Atlanta, Georgia, 15%. Augusta, 27%. Savannah, 45%. Kings Bay, 68%. Waycross, 57%. Mayport, Florida, 77% chance. Jacksonville, 70%. Gainesville, 76%. Daytona Beach, 82%. The Villages, 82%. Orlando, 87% chance of tropical storm force winds. And in Orlando, it's a 44% chance of hurricane force winds as well. Cocoa Beach, 95%. Patrick Air Force Base, 89%. Fort Pierce, 97%. West Palm Beach, 97%. Fort Lauderdale, 93%. Miami, 80% chance of tropical storm force winds, 29% chance of hurricane force winds. Homestead, 70% chance of tropical storm force winds. Marathon, 54%. Key West, 41%. Naples, 71%. Fort Myers, 75%. Venice, 74%. Tampa, 78% chance. And a 30% chance of hurricane force winds there as well. Cedar Key, 78% chance. Tallahassee, 46%. St. Mark's, 50%. Apalachicola, 43%. Panama City, 31%. Destin, 19%. Columbus, Georgia, 22%. Pensacola, 10% chance of tropical storm force winds. Mobile, Alabama, 5%. Gulfport, 3%. And for the Bahamas, Grand Bahama, 98% chance of tropical storm force winds, 66% chance of hurricane. New Providence, 77% chance. Andros, 45. Great Exuma, 22. San Salvador, 28. So those are the latest wind speed probabilities and similar numbers flashing across the left-hand side of your screen there briefly. Dorian is, according to the National Hurricane Center, a 125 mile an hour storm. According to our estimate, we put it slightly higher, 130 mile per hour winds, just oversteps the threshold to Category 4 status. This is Force 13 Live, our continuing coverage on Hurricane Dorian. We continue all the way through this evening. Do we know if it will be along the coast at high tide is a question that we get here.
Well, at this point, Nathan, I believe it's too far out to determine that at this moment, considering it's fluctuating in velocity.
Indeed.
And Nathan, I'd just like to add that it's the time of year where there are higher than usual tides.
Well, I guess that comes with the territory. I don't know if that is because hurricanes tend to be in the area or whether that is actually a thing. I'm not an expert on tides, quite honestly.
Well,
I'm not the best. I don't have the best knowledge on tides either, but I do know hurricanes really don't affect high or low tide. But high tide certainly makes a huge difference during
obviously.
landfall.
Yeah, they don't affect the timing of the tides, but they obviously, if a hurricane strikes at low tide, that's much better than if it struck at high tide. All right, let's see what else we're looking at here. What's our take on Lakeland, Florida being affected? So
I can answer that.
Okay.
Well, Lakeland, Florida, Nathan, I believe they have a 78 to 80% chance of receiving tropical storm force conditions.
Yeah, pretty high. I think it's going to come up at the bottom of the screen in just a moment.
Well, considering the fact in that area the ground is already very much saturated.
71%.
71%. That's still a high probability.
It is, yeah.
Something to take into consideration. Considering the fact that, as I said before, we've had historical flooding in that area. We've had rivers that are overflowing. We're already dealing with flooding here in the first place. Now we're going to expect a stalling storm over us with substantial rainfall. Can definitely cause major flooding, as well as considering the fact this is the state of Florida. Sinkholes are a definite probability as well. So that's definitely something to take into consideration.
If it becomes a Category 5, could it strike the Bahamas as a Category 5? Yes, it certainly could. Andrew did.
Andrew was a Category 4 at landfall, but reanalysis determined it was a Cat 5, correct?
Sorry, what was that?
At landfall, they determined that Andrew of 1992 was a Category 4 at landfall, but then reanalysis
happened many years later, yeah.
When was reanalysis?
I think it was in 2005.
Wow, that is definitely wild.
I think. But anyway, just something I ought to point out as well, when you do see those percentage chances of tropical storm force winds down the bottom of the screen, that doesn't tell you anything about the hurricane force chances, and those are still very possible. We just don't really list them because it's much easier to forecast whether an area will get tropical storm force winds than hurricane force winds, because the hurricane force wind area within this storm is about 25% of the width of the tropical storm force winds. So there is a much greater margin for error when we're forecasting hurricane force winds, and it's very difficult to put numbers on it, and probably unhelpful as well.
Nathan, I have a question from Jonah Parks on Facebook.
Yeah.
Why do hurricanes strengthen or maintain their intensity when crossing the Bahamas?
Well, the Bahamas are very small islands, and the sea surface temperatures in the vicinity are piping hot. Always tends to be the case. You saw with Joaquin, it was moving so slowly around the islands, yet it still managed to maintain Category 4 intensity. That was a crazy storm, if I ever saw one. You know, the only island that could really possibly slow down a storm's intensification just a little bit is Andros Island, the largest there. You can see it on the left-hand side. But generally, the Bahamas are just so small and not very hilly, and the storm just goes over them as if they aren't there. We're coming up to a short break here at the end of the hour. You can keep your questions coming in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the YouTube chat box right now, and we'll take on any more questions. We'll try to anyway, because there have been so many coming in. I know we have missed loads, but keep trying, and maybe soon we'll try and get those questions answered. In the meantime, we're taking a short break. We'll be back about 1 minute after the start of the next hour. Back in a few minutes. Coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colors wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Hurricane Dorian is a Category 3 according to the National Hurricane Center. We're going a little bit higher, saying Category 4, 130 miles per hour. National Hurricane Center now up to 125 miles per hour. We based our estimate on the fantastic looking appearance on the satellite imagery, which was fully supportive and still is of a minimal Category 4. The National Hurricane Center just shy of that. They may well upgrade it later on as recon continue to, well, find whatever they're going to find inside the storm. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by several members of the team tonight, consisting this hour of Yuxinada, David, Orlando, Tim, Mike, Strat, and Sam. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What's going on with recon right now? Any new information?
Well, Recon is about to pass by into the northeastern quadrant of Dorian, so we'll get new data from that and a new pressure reading, so that'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely will. To reiterate, a hurricane warning is in effect for parts of the Bahamas right now. I will get the specifics in just a moment here as we get all our graphics back up and running. There is the National Hurricane Center's track forecast with the warnings outlined. They issued hurricane warnings for the northwestern Bahamas, excluding Andros Island, which is still under a hurricane watch. There's the wind speed probabilities on the map there as well. And these are the key messages which I'll briefly go through here. Life-threatening storm surge and devastating hurricane-force winds are likely in portions of the northwestern Bahamas where a hurricane warning is in effect. Residents should execute their hurricane plan and listen to advice given by local emergency officials. Life-threatening storm surge and devastating hurricane-force winds are likely along portions of the Florida East Coast by early next week. But since Dorian is forecast to slow down and turn northward near the coast, it is too soon to determine when or where the highest surge and winds will occur. Residents should have their hurricane plan in place, know if they are in a hurricane evacuation zone, and listen to advice given by local emergency officials. A prolonged period of storm surge, high winds and rainfall is possible in portions of Florida into next week, including the possibility of hurricane-force winds over inland portions of the Florida Peninsula. Heavy rains capable of life-threatening flash floods are expected over portions of the Bahamas and coastal sections of the southeastern U.S. this weekend through much of next week. Now, that could extend all the way up the U.S. East Coast for all we know so far. We just don't know what will happen after Florida. We still really don't know what will happen with Florida, whether it will make a direct landfall, whether it will move headlong into land and maybe even emerge on the Gulf of Mexico side, or whether it will barely make landfall, or whether it will just, graze the coast of Florida like Matthew did, and then move on to the Carolinas. It could still do something like that at this point, and it will probably be stronger when it does so, bearing in mind what we've seen so far on the satellite imagery. Alright, floor's open for anyone in the team to put their view forward.
Yeah, I would just like to say, as I came back from my break, the startling developments over the past hour with reconnaissance going in, finding pressure significantly lower than we were expecting. I know we went with 960, I think, at the top of the previous hour.
Yeah.
And we come back and the storm is likely in the 940s, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, I know we went quite high because we were initially looking at 966 millibars. Well, no, they went with 970 millibars and 110, was it? Or was it 115 by then? 115 and 970? I can't remember now. One of the two.
It was 115.
But it was 115 and 970. That's a very high pressure for a 115 mile an hour Category 3. And it was probably lower at that point. And now we've found that it is in the 940s somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm just starting to see some satellite imagery for the first time in an hour, and it looks like things have continued to improve as well.
How so?
I don't know, the eyes maintained itself. We were kind of looking last hour, a bit hopeful of a bit of a collapse that looked like it could have been beginning, but it looks like it's held it off. The eye is rounded out again and is still very warm. Is that almost 20 degrees Celsius, if I'm not mistaken, in the eye right now.
19 we got in the last hour.
Yeah, which is a startling difference from 6 hours ago when the eye wasn't really even clear at all.
No, indeed. That wasn't very long ago. It was this morning. And now we're looking at an eye temp. That's not to say the eye wasn't there, though, this morning, but, well, most definitely it's there now.
Yeah, the development of the storm is pretty remarkable, to say the least, especially in the last several hours, with the whole eye developing, the eye warming, and the storm continuing to strengthen at a quicker rate than we could have foreseen.
Yeah, only by a little bit, though. I mean, from yesterday, we were looking at this intensification app. What is happening in the western side of that eye wall right now? I saw it on the water vapor earlier and wondered whether it was something like to do with it falling into night time now, but it does appear to be that the western side is waning.
I don't really know, but if it is, it's a welcoming sign, if anything.
Just around mainly the periphery of the eye wall, but the eye wall itself, I can see just a little tiny blow up there on the western side of the eye. So maybe it's just going to come out in another big burst in just a moment. Is that some new recon information?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Right now, they're passing through the storm. I believe they've recorded flight level winds of 125 knots. And right now, I believe for surface wind, they have 115 knots.
So they are getting Category 4 surface winds now.
It seems so.
So there we are. It certainly looks that way when you look at the satellite imagery, but looks can be deceiving.
That is an unfortunate side of rapid intensification.
Yep. And I really hope it doesn't.
Looking at the satellite imagery again quickly, it looks like despite that bit of a waning on the western side for a bit, it looks like the eye wall itself has remained solidified despite that, and it looks like the stronger convection on the southeast side, which has really continued to develop, is wrapping around to the north and could be trying to come around to the western sides within the next hour or so as well.
It's crazy. Okay, I think we got some more questions. How come models are indicating its top speed at 140 miles an hour when in that area it still has good conditions to strengthen? Well, not all models are saying that. Some of them are saying 150 plus. But what we can really say, let's just actually take a look back. Oop, something's broken there. Take a look back at the forecast from 18 Zulu, which is 6 hours ago now. The new ones should come out pretty shortly. 6 hours ago, these were what the models were saying. And they had the storm, almost all the models, in 12 hours, you draw the consensus there, had it at about 120 miles an hour. And now after 6 hours, it's 130 miles an hour. So if I could annotate this screen, unfortunately I can't, but you would draw a big dot at the 6 hour mark, which is obviously halfway to 12 hours, and it would be just about in that category 4 bracket, ahead of any of those models. So now the models are going to have to reassess the situation, and they're going to have to put out a new forecast based on the new information that the storm is a category 4, and I really wouldn't be surprised if some models predict a category 5 at the next run. And I really wouldn't be surprised if the consensus was near Cat 5 as well, at some point.
Yeah, the storm's proving to definitely be remarkable, especially in comparison to just a few days. because just a few days ago, the storm wasn't even supposed to be anywhere near this intensity.
Yeah, and just to point out, at that same time period, Monday and Tuesday, initially we were expecting dissipation of this system.
It's almost a joke, isn't it? But that was actually true.
Yeah, I did have it going through Hispaniola and mountains tearing it apart, and then it became a depression and possibly falling apart. But now here we are, 4 days from that forecast, and a Category 4 a Category 3, but we think now it's a Category 4. I mean, it's just amazing how much a forecast can change in that amount of time.
The center relocation of the system after it crossed through the Lesser Antilles initially has made such a drastic difference for what we can assume to be countless lives across the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Florida, and potentially even more places in the future.
Yeah, it's honestly made a startling difference, and unfortunately, it seems inevitable that more people are going to definitely be in harm's way, and that leaves more opportunity for more people to be hurt.
Nathan, I have a question from Facebook, and I'll direct it to Strat. Jared Young asks, thoughts on the west-southwest dip depicted in some of the 18 Zulu models.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My connection's just not the best right now.
A southerly dip in the model, Strat. Your thoughts?
Oh, a southerly dip. I think that was the GFS we were talking about a while back. The 18Z run does this weird kink to the southwest very briefly at around 80 hours or so, and then kind of drives back to the west-northwest and then northwest, barely touching inland in Florida. I think that's what he's talking about.
Could we see it?
Yes, just give me a moment to...
the visuals will help a lot with this kind of thing.
Oh, yes, totally. Let me just load up the models really quick.
And Nathan, whilst Strat is sourcing that information, just back to the satellite imagery and the one prior to the one that's on the screen, I was just wondering whether the eye has been doing a bit of a zigzag or had a wobble in it when you look at the direction.
What has a wobble? Sorry, the current right now. Are we talking about?
Oh, over the last 3 hours. When you look at the satellite imagery.
Hold on, I'll have to go and grab that. This only shows about a half-hour period. Let's see if we can go back and look at a bit of a longer period, and it's quite wise to do that sometimes because you can establish a more long-term trend then to see what's been happening. So yeah, you've seen it's. You could say it's a zigzag, but it's really just the eye getting its shape together, and they often do that sort of thing. But really it's been going in a steady direction, a steady course towards just south of northwest. It's not been zigzagging, but you do tend to get tiny little micro differences within the storm and how it actually moves within a short space of time compared to, but it's more important to look at the overall trend, and that trend is quite clearly in one direction only.
And thanks for that. And just quickly, Strat, just another comment from Facebook. Harry is saying, I want to be surprised if it reaches Cat 5 before Sunday. And picking up on that part, what about the wind shear factor? Is that is that going to prevent further intensification?
Yeah, I don't think I can pull everything up just because reception is kind of.
I'll do the rest.
Reception's kind of garbage. reception's kind of garbage right now just because, it's Friday night in a college during the first week. But what I can say is looking at the satellite imagery right now, it looks like even if convection's waning a bit on the southwestern quadrant, cloud tubs of -70s are starting to fully wrap around the center of the storm finally. It looks like it's more sporadic on the western side right now, but it's finally more solidifying itself as a consolidated feature. In terms of the GFS, in between hours 78 and 84, I can pull it up quickly. That's the stuff I've rendered.
Okay.
Really quick here.
We were looking at my screen in a minute, which I'm going to explain shortly.
Okay,
but let's go back to Strat.
Yeah.
If you want.
This is the GFS run right here, 18Z. This is hour 66. You see Dorian around Freeport here. You initially think, it's going to stall out, move to the north. Hour 72 and 78 would indicate that. In between hour 78 and 84, though, it takes this weird dip to the southwest before resuming a track more towards the west-northwest, then northwest, barely skirting inland into Florida, and then back up the coastline. So I think that's what that viewer was talking about. This weird dip that you see right here, this weird kinks to the southwest. That's probably what he was talking about when he asked that question.
All right.
Right.
We just received a comment. What are the temperatures of the waters ahead of Dorian, says Kung Fu Platypus, who also sends a very generous super chat over. There goes Strat's screen. And thank you very much for that, by the way. Very useful indeed. It helps, the support that we get, we have received over the last few days of our coverage of Dorian so far. And we're really only just getting started. And not just that, but support that people provide us through being part of our stream, just the community and everyone who is on our team tonight helping with the coverage. But looking at this model run here, you can see all the models side by side on this view, and I'll explain that shortly. But the first question there, the temperatures ahead of the waters ahead of Dorian. That is the top right panel. No, it's not. It's the middle right panel on the screen. That's the sea surface temperatures. So the black vertical line is where we're at right now. The sea surface temperatures around 29 degrees Celsius. They're going to remain that temperature all the way through for the next 4 days or so. Now, the top right-hand panel is the wind shear, so that's quite an important one. Let's see if we can get a bit of a zoom in on that one. Okay, it won't go that way. We'll zoom back out then. So the top right-hand panel is the wind shear. As you can see, as I've been telling people throughout today, wind shear is the lowest that it's probably going to be today. So that's why Dorian has had an absolute golden opportunity to intensify as much as it has, and it's taken full advantage quite clearly. Wind shear will rise to moderate levels, 10 to 15 knots, starting early tomorrow morning. Now, that's still not really that high. Storms can intensify all the way up to wind shear in the 20s. So it's below 20 knots, so it's still favourable for further intensification as we go through the early days of September. Relative humidity isn't as high as it could be, but it is still hovering around the 60% mark and will be the case for some time. There is very little stopping this storm from intensifying more, all the way up until its approach to Florida. The only thing that could possibly stop this storm is itself. If it stalls along the coast and does some upwelling in the waters, then maybe it will start to weaken. And two other things. If the storm does get stronger earlier, then it's more likely to move further north. If the storm slows down more than expected, it is also more likely to move further north. One or two models there only just taking the storm off the coast of Florida, not actually having a landfall at all. But it does still stay very close to the Florida coast, enough to deliver hurricane conditions to a large portion of the coastline. Still, the HWRF and GFS have the storm inland, and so does the National Hurricane Center's forecast.
I would say in regards to a slowdown in forward movement causing any weakening, to keep in mind when we discuss that as well, that ocean heat content there is still very high for the most part, which means that warm water above 26 to 27 degrees Celsius extends very far beneath the surface. So even if it slows down significantly, at least initially, there'll be lots of extra energy for it to pull from, and we won't initially see upwelling have a drastic effect on it. So if it slows down like that, at least at first, it could still actually intensify rather than having upwelling weaken it. So seeing when it pauses and how much ocean heat content is there when it pauses, potentially, in its forward movement is very important.
Again, back to the water vapor imagery showing Hurricane Dorian, which we are rating as a Category 4 with winds of 130 miles per hour and a pressure of around 949 millibars. The National Hurricane Center went with 125 miles per hour at their advisory 20 minutes ago, which is just short of what we're going with and is, crucially, the border between Category 3 and 4, so they're still on the Category 3 side. However, recon is becoming ever more conclusive that this storm has Category 4 force winds. And do we have any updates on that? Anyone?
Nothing really too new. Recon just did its northeast to southwest pass. SFMR of 115 knots was confirmed. Flight level reaching 126 knots about as well. So definitely Category 4 flight level, and it looks to be Category 4 surface, with that pressure way lower down in the 940s now as well. So it looks like we almost certainly have a Category 4 hurricane on our hands at this point in time.
What pressures are we looking
just
at?
Taking another look at satellite imagery quickly as well. I don't know if you can pull it up. These negative 70s are very quickly wrapping around the western side of the eye wall at this point in time.
Let's have another look here.
It's easiest to see in the 1 minute imagery. You see the change of these very colder cloud
Looking
tops
around the western side.
from around an hour ago, it looks like. Not even an hour ago. From 30 minutes ago to now, these minus 70s have started to pop up pretty quickly around the northern and western eye wall at this point in time. So watching this continue to develop is very important there. You can actually see it on screen right now. You kind of see those darker reds starting to become black bubble up there in the northwestern quadrant.
That's not good. Because that means that it could have Category 5.
Whoa there. Whoa there, you just mentioned it. That's not a good idea. You know,
don't do that.
if we are going to see Category 5, then we're going to have to see deeper shades of black wrapping the whole way around.
Oh, okay. No, that's my mistake.
I mean, yeah, it is very we look at this imagery and it can look so convincing. We've seen storms look like this and be Category 5s, but when you actually look at the more established imagery that we look at from RAM, for instance, there's still only greens, hardly getting into the red zones. And that only means that this is a minimal Category 4, most likely. That eye temperature is extremely convincing, though. Really pushes that number up because it's nearly 20 degrees Celsius. But the cloud top's still letting it down a little bit, actually. We're now joined by Ryan. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Now, I'm sure you'll have been monitoring the storm all day as well. What were your thoughts when you first saw that this storm was somewhat rapidly intensifying?
I mean, I guess it was rapid intensification. I would have called it that. But, yeah, I was, expecting it. I knew that Dorian was going to rapidly intensify at some point during its life. So I'm surprised that it kind of took until this point, though. Like, for the past 2 days, I'm like, okay, Dorian's going to start rapidly intensifying now. Now it's going to start rapidly intensifying. And it was just, a gradual intensification trend. But of course, within the past 6 hours or so, maybe 6 to 12 hours, we've really been seeing that intensification happen at a faster rate.
Yeah, that eye cleared out right as we started streaming, really, and it just continued to kind of go downhill from there.
David, you're showing us something now.
Yeah, I'm showing the sims, and you can see the the tracker, they have a category 4 on landfall, and they have it category 2 around Jacksonville.
I mean, yeah, this is basically a projection of the National Hurricane Center forecast, sure.
Yep. And what I'm looking at is the wind shear factor. So wind shear really isn't a issue. What is it, 5? What is it, up
It's
to
low
15
today, yeah.
knots low.
But you're right, wind shear remains low, 10 to 15 knots all the way. That is low enough for steady and in some cases rapid strengthening.
Have a look at the RAM model plot, see what the models are saying for wind shear.
Especially if you look at the HWRF model, it shows below 10 knots of wind shear for almost the whole of the next 4 days as well. So if you want to take the extremist point of view, we could hypothetically have wind shear even further below that as well.
Well, yes.
That would not be good.
The accuracy of the HWRF, though, is to be heavily questioned. Let's keep that in mind. But general shear prospects are pretty positive for the storm itself in the coming days.
I honestly think that, I mean, it's obviously showing signs that it is still intensifying at this moment.
Just see if I can get a new eye temperature here, whether it has gone up at all. For those who are unfamiliar with the satellites, if the eye temperature is increasing, that is an intensifying storm, especially in this situation. And if the cloud tops around it, the eye wall, the temperatures inside that, if they're decreasing, then that also means that the storm is intensifying. So if you get both of them at the same time, then you know this is well on its way. And the eye wall temperatures are fluctuating quite a bit.
I would say, though, at least in the past 10 to 15 minutes or so, the cloud tops are cooling pretty quickly around the eye wall. The southeastern kind of cold spot in the convection is deepening while moving to the northeastern quadrant as well. I think the only thing, if we see a trend of deep convection of minus 60s plus come further back on that southwestern quadrant, we're going to be looking at a very dangerous situation.
All right, so, I can tell you that for the first time, the eye temperature has now reached 20 degrees Celsius on the satellite. That is quite rare, actually. Doesn't happen very often. There's several Category 5s that haven't even managed that. But just a reminder that the convection is still rather weak compared to Category 5 storms in general, so we're not saying it's anywhere near Category 5 intensity, but there could now be a case to call this 140 miles per hour.
That's a lot, and
I'd want to see the next northeast eye wall pass. If you look at the Woman imagery, that deep convection of minus 70s has started to flare up quite dramatically along the northeastern quadrant, as well as wrapping around the eye wall pretty quickly. To get this even higher up, though, if I want to see 140 miles an hour confirmed, I'd want to see those negative 60s start to re-wrap back around the southwestern side of the storm, which within the next 2 hours could feasibly happen.
Indeed. All right. Well, at this point, I guess we'll take another short break here at Force 13 HQ, whilst we continue to try and get our thoughts together. And we'll probably take some more questions after this short break as well. Send them in, start your message with Force 13, all in text. It will tag us big and bright, and we can get on to some more questions that you might have. There will probably be a lot, and I can't guarantee we'll get through absolutely everything, but we'll do our darndest to serve everyone who's watching at this time, because otherwise, what's the point? Because this storm is very dangerous, and if we're not helping, then there really is no point in us staying here. We hope we're doing a good job so far. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Update here, the National Hurricane Center have issued a special advisory upgrading the storm to 130 mile an hour winds, category 4. Well, hate to say it, but we said it first. 130 miles an hour and a pressure, they're saying, of 950 millibars, which is just one above what our analysis currently is. So the National Hurricane Center now on board as well with category 4 status for Hurricane Dorian. It certainly makes sense looking at the imagery. And let's get some instant reaction from the team. Who's there?
I'm not really surprised.
Samuel just returned to the stream, and and just finding out that the NHC did its special advisory, marking it as a Category 4 storm at this point. I would say I was expecting that. I was certainly expecting that. Just didn't know if it would be this hour or in the next update or potentially the following update. But seeing it as a Category 4 storm, I think it's starting to, and since it's still continuing to intensify, I think right at this point it does have a bit of a better. I am upping the chances for a Category 5 peak.
Well, that would make sense, I think. I think we're joined by Devon.
Hello, Devon.
But
yes, I'm here.
Oh, he is here. I think you were having some difficulties just then. Welcome. Your thoughts, I guess?
Pretty much it was a question of... Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry about being a little soft there, but it was really a question of when rather than if with this storm. Getting up to Category 4 intensity, especially seeing how it really exploded as it got north of the Virgin Islands a couple of days ago, and now seeing it as this very... I hate to use a word like this, but a very beautiful system right now as it is rolling rather slowly towards the Bahamas. And the satellite appearance is absolutely indicative of a Category 4.
Yep.
Recon finally just flew through the storm and backed that up with a minimum central pressure of 950. And that also seems to be in line with what the Recon estimates are saying, what satellite estimates are saying. And this is really not a surprise to me. And shear is only supposed to go down over the next 24 hours. The issue is...
it's this evening that's really the best time for the storm by the looks of things before wind shear goes up slightly. But still, the next 5 days, Devon, 10 to 15 knots.
All right, well, even then...
Yeah.
Even then, I don't think that the storm has strong enough convection within it in order to get all the way up to the full Category 5 status. I really think that there's going to have to be a lot of strings pulled. If you take a look at the infrared, at least the RAM.
Yeah. We have been showing that several times, and I have been making that, the the 1 minute imagery for the rapid scan from Go 16 is very easy on the eye, isn't it?
Yes, it is really nice imagery to look at, and I really do. I want to say it is an awesome. It is awesome that we have this service where they make 1 minute rapid scan images free to the public and available for anyone to see. I think that's just absolutely beautiful. Great job by Noah, and also great on RAM to provide that slider.
Something as well, though, Devon, though, normally when you look at the RAM imagery, there's only greens, not really any reds. You wouldn't call it a Category 4 at all, but it must be helped massively by this 20 Celsius eye right now.
Correct, yeah. So obviously the eye would end up being what we would call a warm medium gray eye with a black CDO. And typically whenever that happens, it actually is indicative of 145 miles an hour rather than just 130. Obviously, there are asymmetries within the storm that would knock down the satellite estimate on it. Just the raw estimate would be 145 miles an hour. Clearly, the storm is not perfect. If you look at the eye, it is a little bit ragged. But other than that, I mean, the storm's just absolutely gorgeous at this point in time. And taking a look at Recon, it also looks like another eye wall replacement might be on the way soon. So yes, we got that to look forward to.
Yeah, looking at those very latest frames, the eye does appear to be becoming a bit more of an oval.
Yeah, I'm starting to notice that too. It seems to, I guess, starting to wobble a bit. Would you say that?
Although I would note, though, that it did do that about 2 hours ago, 2.5 hours ago, and remained completely fine. So keep an eye out for that. The other thing, though, is that these upper negative 60s to low negative 70s are almost completely wrapped around the eye now at this point in time. Large improvement from 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, you can kind of see that on the imagery that you have on the screen, that kind of infrared. Those kind of darker reds have enveloped the whole southern eye wall at this point in time, kind of protecting it from that lack of convection that seemed to be developing for a bit. And we just have to see really at this point in terms of intensity if that deeper convection can wrap around back to the southwestern quadrant again.
Here's a question for the historians. Is it rare for Florida to deal with major hurricanes every year since 2016?
Well, they didn't see a major hurricane in 2016, but it was close.
Very, very close.
Very, very close. Wasn't like Matthew's eye wall, like, didn't it stay off, like, just miles offshore or something?
Yeah, it
like
was
that?
so close.
Just to add on to that point, major hurricane force winds did come ashore at Cape Canaveral.
They did. So I guess that one does count.
I don't know if it does. I went on the... I believe the NHC says that the top winds in the United States for Matthew was like 100, was like Cat 2 range.
Well, I'm not going to have that debate at this point in time anyway.
Let's not talk about Matthew.
No, the less we talk about Matthew during our stream tonight, the better, I think. But, you know, I've seen bandied about the comparisons to the late 1940s, which had many strong storms strike the Florida Peninsula. I'm just bringing them up on my screen here now. Well, you won't be able to see it, it's on one of my other screens, but Florida had a massive spree of hurricanes from 1945 to 1950. And now that I've got them all up here, so 1945 there was a hurricane that struck Miami-Dade as a Category 4. In 1947 the Fort Lauderdale hurricane struck as a Category 4. In 1948 there was a Category 4 landfall over the Everglades and over the Keys. Well, Category 3 over the Keys. In 1949, there was a Category 4 landfall in southeastern Florida, and in 1950, Hurricane Easy struck as a Category 3.
And
Hurricane King.
Also Hurricane King as well as a Category 4.
So that was a terrible few years for Florida, just to show how bad it could be. It has been pretty bad, though.
quite ironic how how Hurricane Easy, how its name is.
Oh.
I mean, the name is
No.
so ironic because it was a very difficult storm to, predict, two, and to survive, and
Indeed.
Okay.
We have a handful of questions. One question there: will it be a 185 mile an hour storm? Let's just steady on there right now.
I can safely rule
No.
Yeah, I can say I
If
can
that
safely
happens,
rule that
I will
out.
genuinely eat a shoe.
No, it's not going to happen. No, it won't happen.
Yeah,
The
it doesn't
storm-
have enough.
If it were
does not have
somehow-
enough, it doesn't have any time to go. Doesn't have enough time to go up to that.
The storm definitely has the time to go up to that strength. It's still 4 days out from landfall. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't have the convection to do it.
And why is that, Devon?
Well, that mainly has to do. That's a good question.
But from
that
what
mainly
I've
has
seen,
to do with the convective available potential energy.
but from what I've seen,
around
Devon,
the system.
looking at the rainfall estimates, the rainfall trail of the storm increases massively when it nears the Bahamas. That must surely suggest a lot more convection.
That suggests that the storm is going to have its forward speed cut in half.
That as well, but it gets larger. I mean, I don't think that would be the full picture.
You figure the storm's forward speed is going to be cut in half. While that happens, the storm's going to be going underneath an eyewall replacement cycle, which will grow the radius of the storm. So that's why the rain swath gets wider. So the rain swath is going to be more rain because it's moving slower. It's going to be wider because it's getting bigger due to eyewall replacement. So that's not necessarily indicative of higher convection. The rain rate is going to end up being roughly the same.
All right. And you know that over the next 4 or 5 days, it's going to be over pretty much uniformly 29 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures. So how much would it have to slow down before we might be concerned, or the storm might be concerned about upwelling and then therefore weakening?
Stalling entirely?
It would have to stall entirely?
Yeah.
So that's something we'll be looking out for over the next few days. And just another thing to clarify as well, do you agree that if it does move slower than forecast, that it will end up going further north?
If it continues to be stronger than forecast, yeah, it would.
Stronger than forecast, yeah, but if it moves more slowly than forecasted as well.
If it moves more slowly than forecast, then the ridge is going to weaken more. All that's going to do is prevent it from moving further west rather than further north or south.
That was my point. So it will move.
It gets to Florida.
So it will move further north, though, right?
I don't think it would move further north. I think it would just prevent it from moving further west.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Just a reminder what the warnings are right now. A hurricane warning is in effect for, for the northwestern Bahamas, excluding Andros Island, and a hurricane watch is in effect for Andros Island itself. No other watches or warnings have been issued yet. Guys, do we think that we might see the watches come into effect for Florida tonight, or do you think they'll wait till morning?
Tonight, most likely.
Morning.
I don't know. Probably morning.
I don't know. I would if I were the National Weather Service or National Hurricane Center, I would definitely try to at least get some kind of at least a watch or two out tonight.
Nah, I just don't see, just knowing the criteria for how they have to put out watches.
Yeah.
It has to be within a certain time frame away from impact. They've already been issuing advisories of potential impacts to the areas, their keynotes, but they haven't issued watches yet because of the time frame away it is from striking land. That's why even though parts have over 90% chance of tropical storm force winds on Florida, you don't see any watches in effect yet because of that reason.
If you haven't seen it recently, there is the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. And don't forget, the center of the storm could still move anywhere within that cone. That means even as far south as Key Largo could get the landfall of Hurricane Dorian. Not very likely, but it is still within the realms of possibility. And of course, the cone does stick out to sea as well. The storm could completely miss Florida still at this point, but I would argue that that is rather unlikely at this stage. But it was very interesting to see yesterday how every model was on board with the Florida landfall, and that was probably the earliest time of consensus prior to an event, certainly for Florida, that I've seen. I think Irma was 60 hours prior to landfall, only then did all the models agree. For Hurricane Andrew, all the models agreed on the landfall only 24 hours before it actually made landfall.
Wow.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
Sorry for any interruption. I'd just like to bring up something that could be important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd just like to bring up something that could be important in the near future, is that even though this is significantly far away from the core of the storm, negative 80-degree cloud tops are starting to pop up on the southeastern.
Minus 80?
Really? Sorry, which part are you talking about?
So to monitor, I said negative 80-degree cloud tops are actually starting to pop up in the southeastern quadrant at this point in time.
You mean that tiny little flare-up there?
Yeah, that tiny little flare-up.
The black dot that some commenters have been mentioning. It's a little black dot.
It's not, no. I'm looking. It's turning whitish on some of the infrared I'm seeing, which indicates negative 80 degrees. Also, this negative 60s to the low negative 70s is also expanding away from the southwestern quadrant, which shows it is reinforcing.
No, yeah, the eye wall is looking pretty good, even though the area immediately to the west of the eye wall is fading away for some reason.
Yeah, it looks like it's trying to reinforce and come back in, though.
Okay, let's see if we've got any more questions. What are the chances that it hits somewhere around Broward or Palm Beach County? I mean, as a landfall location, I would say less than a half chance, but further north, those chances will increase.
You can't pin down a specific landfall location. The landfall's 4 days out. It's impossible to tell where this thing's going to come to shore, if it even comes ashore.
Yeah, we don't even know if it's going to make landfall or not, but it probably
and
will.
And ECMWF thinks that it won't. One of the most coveted models at the moment doesn't think anymore that the storm will make landfall, but that might change again when they do their next runs a little bit later on tonight.
Yeah, that run is really wanting it to pull a Matthew or Hugo.
A full Matthew, though. Matthew, as the National Hurricane Center originally predicted, Matthew really weakened a lot more than they expected when it was paralleling the coast, when it was moving further north. But ECMWF taking it towards the northeast, even passing Cape Cod in the 940s. Just let people think about that for a moment. So just a reminder, the National Hurricane Center issued a special advisory at past, that's 20 minutes ago, declaring that Dorian had become a Category 4 storm. The storm has been intensifying all day. It continues to intensify this evening. The eye temperature now up to 20 degrees Celsius above freezing, which is one of the highest temperatures that I've actually seen in an Atlantic hurricane.
So I just want to go off of Strat's point here. Did you say minus 80 cloud tops?
I'm not seeing it myself.
I think it's approaching negative 80 on a specific second for
okay, hold
very
on.
southeast. It looks like it's fading back to the upper low 70s.
Minus 75 in that black dot.
You do realize that
it looked a bit stronger than that for a couple minutes.
Strat, you do realize that the reds are minus 70 and not minus 80, correct?
I'm looking at a different infrared thing than you
Oh, we
are.
just got to clarify the
probably.
different kinds of imagery. That the red on this image that we're looking at right now denotes minus 60. So the clear, the solid red, and then it goes progressively darker. That's beyond minus 60. There isn't actually that much minus 70 around the eye at all at the minute. Just that little flare up in the northwestern side of the eye wall. Moving on to the west now. That's minus 70, just for reference. And those numbers are very important because if those temperatures get near minus 80 and they wrap all the way around, then we're looking at a category 5.
Minus 70 wrapped all the way around should be a Cat 5 with that item.
I suppose so, yeah.
And
But as you can see,
we're
we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, we're not even getting minus 70 wrapped around the eye in a thick manner, much less a minus 80. Like, minus, we're just not seeing that.
And
Yeah, I don't see the-
Nathan,
David.
we got breaking news.
Okay.
Mandatory evacuations, Brevard County in Florida.
Any more information than that?
Not at this
Specifically?
point in time.
Is it the whole county or?
I'd say it's a whole county, but I'm just looking for additional information. But that's what one viewer is reporting in the chat, and also from what I'm monitoring on Twitter.
Okay.
I've got the information on that, Nathan.
Yes.
It is Brevard County Sheriff's Office has announced an 8 a.m. evacuation Sunday morning for citizens living on Barrier Island, low-lying areas prone to flooding, mobile homes, manufactured homes, and special needs residences. That is for 8 a.m. Sunday morning, Brevard County in Florida.
Do you want to just repeat that for us, Tim, in case people have just joined us?
I sure can. The Brevard County Sheriff's Office in Florida has instituted an 8 a.m. evacuation order Sunday morning for Barrier Island, low-lying areas prone to flooding, mobile homes, manufactured homes, and special needs residences. That is issued by the Brevard County Sheriff's Office for an 8 a.m. Sunday morning evacuation.
So
now, just a question.
Yeah, sure.
Just a question. Are these kinds of orders, these evacuation notices, are they relayed by the emergency alert system?
I don't think so. I don't know. They might be.
Yes, they absolutely should be conveyed through the EAS system.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. I mean, you got to know if there's a voluntary or a mandatory evacuation in your area. You must know that.
The evacuation orders are conveyed just like a severe thunderstorm or a tornado warning would be conveyed through the emergency alert system. It works the exact same way. If you remember, or if there's also like a special weather statement that needs to be put out, that will also pop through the emergency alert system, like the special weather statement that was released just before Katrina's impacts.
All right, we're getting the black dot debacle is starting to unfold. Someone's now telling us that there are 2 black dots on the screen, and should we be worried?
2 black dots. It's 2 black dots. Doesn't sound too bad.
If we go from black dots and we start to see a black ring around the eye, then you should be very, very worried.
It's just a flare-up. I don't know if it's probably. I mean,
you'd want to see
not wrapped around the
consistency first.
Yeah, exactly.
Before making any assumptions and saying, "Oh, well, we're gonna really have this," you want to see some consistency of it first. So I'd want to wait through at least the next hour to confirm anything like that. But the beauty of live streaming the way we are is not only are we going for a long time to provide coverage to as many people as possible, but we get to see the imagery update live right in front of our eyes and see the progress in the same time.
And what else was I going to say? Any more news on Recon at all this hour? Not heard of Pete.
Yeah.
I was gonna say none of us have talked about it for some reason.
Oh,
Let's
that's
see
because the
And
nice the psych.
Nathan,
Yes.
I have another update. National
Sure.
Weather Service Key West. Sustained tropical storm force winds could begin as early as Sunday midday for the Upper Keys, Monday for most other communities.
And there is a more than half chance of tropical storm force winds even in Key West, 52% there.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt a little bit as well. If we could pull up the 0Z model spread for August 31st when we get the chance, more of them are starting to veer offshore again.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yes, 0Z runs are pulling further offshore, hinting more towards the Carolinas impact possibly
good
later
lord.
down the line, or
Yeah,
skirting
they-
the shore
Oh.
completely.
Yeah, they
Good
are.
grief.
They,
Yeah, this is, we're seeing another
no.
drastic change come into effect at this point in time.
Alright, we'll get more
in
information
fact-
about that after this short break. The team will discuss it between themselves, I'm sure, and will bring us back with some model runs at the start of the next hour. Stay tuned, we'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah, you can clearly
Okay.
see.
Our live coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colours wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.